You know that feeling when a story just refuses to stay dead? You think the last dumpster fire finally burned itself out, and then somebody strikes another match, and suddenly the whole block is on fire again. That is exactly what is happening right now with Blueface, and if you thought the leaked videos, the courtroom drama, and the jail sentence were the worst of it, buckle up, because what has just crawled to the surface makes every previous chapter of the Blueface saga look like a warm-up act. This isn't a headline you scroll past. This is the kind of story you screenshot, send to your group chat, and refuse to close the tab on until you've read every single word. Did Blueface really infect Chrisean with chlamydia, and did that infection then get passed to their baby boy Junior on the very day he was born? That is the accusation now spreading across every corner of the internet, and the receipts stacking up behind it are getting harder to laugh off by the hour. Because this is not just gossip anymore. This is not just another petty argument between exes. This is a health story with a newborn at the center of it, and the more you pull the thread, the uglier the sweater gets. A baby cannot defend himself. A baby cannot consent to the choices two adults made in a delivery room. And if half of what is being alleged right now turns out to be true, then Junior didn't just inherit a famous last name, he inherited a diagnosis he never should have been anywhere near. Here is the short version before we go deep, and I promise you, the deep version is worse. Blueface, according to a growing chorus of voices that includes people who know him personally, is walking around allegedly carrying more than one sexually transmitted infection. And instead of quietly getting himself checked and warning the women around him, he is being accused of doing the exact opposite, sleeping around, refusing tests, and letting the consequences land wherever they land. Chrisean caught something. Jaidyn Alexis caught something. And Junior, the baby caught in the middle of a war he never asked to be part of, may have paid the highest price of all. That is not a rumor being passed around by anonymous accounts. That is a claim being made by people with names, faces, and receipts of their own. Let's not skip past the fact that this new wave of drama exploded almost the moment Blueface's most recent stunt hit the timeline. He dropped explicit footage of Jaidyn and her rumored fling with Bravo, framed as revenge for her leaving him while he was locked up. Everybody thought that was the ceiling of his pettiness. It wasn't. Because right after those videos went viral, another photograph started circulating, one that showed Jaidyn with visible bumps around her mouth. Bumps that people online started matching, almost side by side, with older photos of Blueface's lips. Whispers around the block began saying the same thing. Blueface didn't just leak her privacy, he allegedly left her with a souvenir she couldn't scrub off her face. And once those side-by-side comparisons started trending, the story stopped being a revenge video scandal and started morphing into something with actual medical stakes. And Chrisean? Chrisean, the mother of Blueface's youngest son, has been dragged into the same infection storyline, except her chapter is somehow worse, because a baby is involved. This story didn't come from nowhere. It came from Chrisean's own sister, a woman named Tarian, who blew the entire situation wide open during a live stream that people are still replaying today. And once Tarian started talking, there was no putting the words back in the bottle. This wasn't a strategic press release. This wasn't a coordinated attack. This was a family member, mid-argument, breaking every unwritten rule about what stays in the house. The trigger for Tarian's meltdown was money, specifically, unpaid babysitting money. She had been watching Junior for Chrisean, and when Chrisean refused to pay her, Tarian refused to hand the baby back. Whether you call that leverage or something uglier depends on which side of the family you're on, but the situation escalated so fast that the police were called, and officers reportedly kicked down the door in the middle of the night to retrieve Junior. That was already a mess. And then Tarian got on Instagram Live to explain her side of the story, and cracked the whole story wide open in the process. The moment she picked up her phone and pressed record, this story stopped being a custody argument and became a public expose. According to Tarian, when Chrisean gave birth to Junior, she was actively dealing with a chlamydia flare-up in her down there region. The medical staff, she said, warned Chrisean point-blank that a natural delivery could expose the baby to infection, and they strongly urged a C-section. But according to Tarian, Chrisean refused. She didn't want the scar. She didn't want the recovery. She didn't want to ruin the tattoo she had inked below her stomach. So she pushed the baby out anyway, straight through what Tarian described as an infected canal. And that is the moment this story stopped being a soap opera and started being a public health question. If you have ever been in a delivery room, you know that doctors do not casually recommend surgery. When a physician tells a mother a C-section is the safer route, there is a reason. And Chrisean, according to her own sister, waved that reason off because of a tattoo. Chrisean didn't sugarcoat any of it. She said Chrisean's motherly instincts didn't kick in the day the baby was born, and they didn't kick in when the nurse tried to have a private conversation with her about her diagnosis. She said Chrisean brushed the doctors off, made her own decision, and then had the nerve to play the wounded party months later when family members raised concerns. Chrisean also made it clear that she was not the aggressor in the situation. She said she had begged Chrisean to leave her alone, that she had children of her own to protect, and that her home was a no-go zone. But when Chrisean allegedly started making threats toward Chrisean's daughters, she said the gloves came off, and she came forward with everything. That is the classic tipping point of every family expose. Someone protects the door until the door is kicked in, and then everything on the other side of the door comes flying out. The most damning part of Chrisean's monologue wasn't even the accusation itself. It was the tone. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't performing. She was sitting there, exhausted, saying that she had already been to a meeting with Child Protective Services to clear her own name, and now she was making sure everybody else's name was on the record too. She warned that karma had a return address, and that every action Chrisean was throwing out into the world was going to come circling back with interest. And here's the kicker, she said she was still holding back. That she could go a lot further if she wanted to. That was the moment the internet realized this wasn't just a spat between sisters. This was a witness on the stand. And when a witness who claims to have more evidence in reserve tells you she is being merciful, you take that seriously. If you're sitting there thinking, okay, but that's just one person talking, here is where it gets uncomfortable, because Jaidyn Alexis, in a separate interview, effectively backed up Chrisean's timeline without being asked to. Jaidyn casually mentioned that she had heard Chrisean had a nasty STD infection right around the time Junior was born, and that she picked it up from getting intimate with Blueface while pregnant. She wasn't testifying. She wasn't in court. She was just talking. But when two people in Blueface's orbit, one his baby's aunt, the other his other baby's mother, accidentally corroborate the same story from different rooms, the pattern starts to look less like rumor and more like receipts. Two independent voices, no coordination, same core allegation. That is the exact math prosecutors love. Keep this in mind, the specific infection at the center of all of this is not some minor inconvenience that clears up with a pill. If a newborn is exposed to untreated chlamydia during vaginal delivery, the bacteria can attach to sensitive tissue, including the tissue around the baby's eyes. In some documented cases, that exposure can trigger a form of conjunctivitis serious enough to affect vision, and in the most severe scenarios, if it goes untreated long enough, it can put a baby's eyesight at real risk. Some infants can also develop respiratory complications from the same exposure. That is not internet exaggeration. That is why every hospital in America screens pregnant patients for it. That is why doctors offer C-sections when it's flaring. That is why they push antibiotics before, during, and after delivery when a positive result comes back. And that is exactly what Chrisean was reportedly offered, and reportedly refused. So they say. Whatever that's worth. Because if a doctor lays out a medical safety plan and a mother chooses aesthetics over the plan, the fallout doesn't land on the mother. It lands on the baby. And I'll be straight with you, Jaidyn coming forward to drag Chrisean over that decision is one of the wildest moments in this whole story, because Jaidyn didn't exactly walk out of the Blueface chapter unscathed either. Right around the same window she was throwing shots at Chrisean, Jaidyn was reportedly back in Blueface orbit doing her own intimate reconciliation with him. And the photographs that surfaced afterward, the ones showing those matching bumps around her mouth, didn't help her case. People online lined them up next to Blueface's older lip photos, the ones he had previously tried to explain away as some kind of skin condition, and the resemblance was uncomfortable enough that it became the internet's punchline of the week. Specifically, the accusation was herpes. And once a rumor like that attaches itself to a face on camera, it doesn't wash off. Now let's rewind, because there is context that changes how this hits. This is not the first time Blueface has been photographed with those bumps. Years earlier, similar images surfaced, and at the time, Blueface flatly denied that they were herpes-related. He said it was a keloid. He said it was scarring. He said it was anything but what people thought it was. Fine. One time, maybe you accept the explanation. But when the same pattern keeps showing up on his face, and then the same pattern starts showing up on the faces of the women around him, at some point the coincidence tax gets too high to pay. There is a limit to how many keloids one man can carry before the audience starts doing basic pattern recognition. And right on cue, while all of this was unfolding online, Blueface's newest partner walked into the middle of the tornado. Her name is Nivea. She is pregnant. And she saw everything the rest of us saw. So she did the responsible thing. She asked Blueface to go get tested. And Blueface, according to his own words on his own stream, refused. His logic, and I use that word loosely, was that Nivea goes to the doctor for both of them. If she comes back clean, then he must be clean too. That is the philosophy of a man who has never once opened a biology textbook, and it is the philosophy of a man whose pregnant girlfriend deserves so much better than that. Because that is not how transmission works. That is not how testing works. That is not how any of this works. A woman coming back clean today does not mean anything about a man who has been out in the streets for weeks between her appointments. Nivea then revealed something that turned the whole conversation from irresponsible to alarming. She said she had received a direct message from one of Blueface's other partners, a woman on the side, warning her to go get tested immediately, because Blueface had allegedly given them something. That woman was worried, according to Nivea, not just for Nivea's health but for the health of Nivea's unborn baby. Read that sentence again. A stranger reached out to a pregnant woman to warn her that her baby might be at risk because of a man they were both entangled with. That is the moment this story becomes a public safety story. That kind of message does not get sent lightly. That kind of message is a person swallowing their pride and their embarrassment because their conscience won't let them stay quiet. The reaction from the podcast panel that broke this news down was maybe the most gut-punching part of the whole cycle. One of the hosts kept repeating the same line, over and over, "That scares me. That scares me for the baby. That scares me for Nivea. That scares me for everyone." That triple hit landed harder than any accusation, because it stopped being about celebrity drama and started being about a real pregnant woman navigating a partner who won't even walk into a clinic. Nivea has done nothing wrong in this story. Nivea did not sign up for this. And yet Nivea is the one carrying the risk, because Blueface will not. That imbalance, that quiet, ugly imbalance, is at the center of every scene in this whole saga. The woman does the work of protecting the baby. The man does the work of protecting his ego. And still, the story keeps stacking. Because just as everybody was digesting the Nivea update, Blueface posted a random photo of himself holding a plate of food, and within minutes people started zooming in on his hands. There were marks. Spots. Bumps. Not dirt, not shadow, actual visible skin irregularities on his fingers. And in a story that has already trained the audience to see infection everywhere, the internet had a field day. Whether those marks were what people said they were or something else entirely, the fact that the accusation stuck instantly tells you exactly how much credibility Blueface has left with the public right now. Which is basically none. When your audience is willing to believe the worst possible explanation before you've even offered a good one, you have already lost the narrative. And here's the twist that pushes the whole story into a different genre entirely. Because in the middle of all this STD talk, another set of allegations has quietly been running parallel, the ones about Blueface's actual preferences. The ones about who, exactly, he's been meeting up with when the cameras aren't on. And Blueface has not been doing himself any favors in that department. Every time he opens his mouth on a live stream, he seems to hand another piece of evidence to the people building the case against him. There was the moment on Chrisean's own stream when Blueface, straight out of prison, suggested to Chrisean that they get intimate in a specific way that avoided her anatomy entirely. His explanation, delivered on live camera, was that he found the female body's natural discharge unpleasant, and he preferred an alternative route. That comment alone would have been forgettable coming from anyone else. Coming from a man already fighting off other rumors, it landed differently. And it wasn't a slip. He doubled down on the preference in a follow-up stream, describing it in more detail than anyone needed. When you spend that much energy explaining what you don't want, people start asking what you actually do want. Then there was the moment on Cenat's stream when Blueface casually admitted to being intimate with a little person. That confession alone was already the kind of thing that breaks the internet for 48 hours. But what made it unforgettable was Chrisean's immediate follow-up question. She didn't assume the little person was a woman. She didn't laugh. Her very first reaction was to ask whether the person was a man or a woman. And the internet lost its mind, because a girlfriend does not ask that question unless she has a reason to. That reaction lived on timelines for weeks. Clip after clip after clip, dissecting the microsecond of Chrisean's face before she said a word. Because sometimes a woman's expression tells a story 1,000 tweets can't. Chrisean herself has hinted at the same theory in public tweets. When Blueface accused her of sleeping with a certain married rapper, Chrisean fired back with a claim that she had seen very specific search terms in his browser history, terms that suggested his own preferences might not be as straightforward as he insists. She even said she was okay with him being bisexual, but she wanted him to be honest about it before she caught real feelings. Blueface has never squarely denied any of that in a way that stuck. And that non-denial has become its own kind of evidence, because the man who tweets about everything, sues nobody, and streams for hours a day somehow always seems to lose his voice on this exact topic. And then, capping the whole storyline, there is the Cole Carrigan situation. Cole is a well-known drag performer who alleges that Blueface slid into his direct messages trying to arrange a private meetup. Cole didn't just say it, Cole posted what he claimed were screenshots. Cole referenced what he claimed was video. And once the receipts are out there, there's no walking it back. Blueface responded, of course, by dismissing all of it as internet noise. He said he wasn't going to sue anyone for defamation, that he saw all of it as entertainment, and that he could separate his real self from what he called the virtual world. He signed off with the phrase, "I am the truth." Which, at this point in the story, is the funniest sentence in the entire cycle. Because if Blueface is the truth is having a rough month. If Blueface is the truth, then the truth is currently trending on every gossip page in the country for all the wrong reasons. Now, none of this proves in a courtroom that Blueface knowingly transmitted anything to anyone. That is important to say. But if you line up the accusations from Chrisean's own sister, the accusations from Jaidyn's interview, the accusations from Nivea's inbox, the accusations from Cole's screenshots, and the accusations from Blueface's own mouth on his own streams, the pattern becomes so consistent that the burden of doubt starts shifting. And if any of these women can prove they were exposed to something Blueface knew he had, they don't need to argue about it on Instagram anymore. They need to argue about it in front of a judge. End of story. Because at some point the internet stops being the courtroom, and the actual courtroom has to take over. The comment sections have already begun their verdict. One viewer wrote that this means every woman who has ever been near Blueface probably needs to go get checked, immediately. Another wrote that Chrisean and Jaidyn need to stop performing their fights on live streams and start booking medical appointments and lawyers. A third wrote that the real victim in this entire saga is Junior, a baby who did not choose any of the adults in his life and is now stuck carrying the consequences of their decisions. And it is hard to argue with any of that. Someone else pointed out that if Chrisean picked it up from Blueface, then Jaidyn picked it up from Blueface, then the woman warning Nivea picked it up from Blueface, then the math on how many other people are quietly walking around with the same story starts to get genuinely frightening. That is not a joke. That is a chain of exposure the size of a rap tour. But the biggest question isn't legal. It's human. Because at some point, somebody in Blueface's inner circle has to sit him down and tell him that this is not funny anymore. That the streams and the punchlines and the "I am the truth" tweets don't make the medical reality go away. That the woman carrying his next child deserves a partner who walks into a clinic without being begged. That the son already born deserves parents who make the harder choice when a doctor tells them to. And that the audience watching all of this, the audience that made him famous in the first place, is not clapping anymore. They are watching. They are counting. And they are waiting to see whether anything actually changes. Because the internet forgives a lot, but the internet does not forgive when a baby is the one who paid the tab. So now the ball is in your court. Do you believe Blueface knowingly passed on infections to Chrisean and Jaidyn? Do you believe the accusations about the down low rumors, or do you think he's being unfairly dragged? And what do you think should happen next, court, exposure, silence, or something else entirely? Should Nivea leave now while she still can, or does she wait for him to face his own reflection first? Drop your take in the comments right below, because this comments section is about to be a battlefield and I want to read every single word of it. And when you're done, click right here to watch the next wild breakdown video, because trust me, if you thought this one was heavy, the next one takes the whole story to a place nobody saw coming.